Imagine stepping off a chartered plane into a world where the dirt is a bruised shade of orange and the air vibrates with the mechanical hum of heavy industry. You are thousands of kilometers from the near city, standing in a landscape that feels more like the surface of Mars than the familiar suburbs of home. For many, this is the beginning of a grand ambition, the entry into the lucrative and high-stakes world of fly-in, fly-out work. It is a realm defined by a striking paradox. Here, entry-level salaries do not just compete with the national average, they often double or even triple it. A person with no formal degree can suddenly find themselves earning more than a seasoned architect or a dedicated nurse. It is marketed as the ultimate shortcut to financial security, a golden ticket to independence. This is the starting point of our deep dive into the FIFO to Freedom Blueprint, a strategic investigation into how to navigate one of the most intense labor markets on the planet. Most people enter the resource sector with a very specific and limited goal in mind. They tell themselves it will be a temporary sprint, a short stint of 2 years to clear a mortgage or build a robust rainy day fund. But as the months turn into years, a psychological and financial phenomenon known as the Golden Handcuffs begins to tighten its grip. It starts subtly, perhaps with the purchase of a high-end truck, then a luxury boat, and eventually a sprawling home with a high-interest loan to match. Before the worker realizes it, their lifestyle has expanded to perfectly consume their inflated paycheck. The original exit strategy evaporates into the desert heat, replaced by a relentless cycle of debt and lifestyle creep that keeps them tethered to the heavy machinery. They are no longer working to buy their freedom. They are working simply to maintain a standard of living they can no longer afford to walk away from. The physical reality of this life is a harsh, uncompromising contrast to the tidy digits appearing in a bank account every fortnight. Home becomes a donga, a small shipping container that serves as a bedroom, an office, and a lonely sanctuary. The shifts are grueling, often 12 hours of intensive manual labor in extreme weather conditions that range from blistering heat to bone-chilling mountain winds. Yet the greatest cost is not the physical exhaustion, it is the invisible tax on the human spirit and family life. It is the weight of missing a child's first steps, the silence of an empty house during a milestone anniversary, and the gradual erosion of social ties back in the real world. In this environment, you are physically present at the site, but emotionally anchored to a life that continues to move forward in your absence. This model wasn't always the standard. Historically, resource companies built mining towns where families lived together, creating a sense of permanence and community. Over time, the industry pivoted toward the FIFO model to maximize efficiency and reduce the overhead of maintaining permanent settlements. This shift fundamentally altered the social fabric of the workforce, turning mining into a transient experience where people are perpetually in transit. The FIFO to freedom concept rejects the idea of being a permanent cog in this machine. It defines the mining sector not as a lifelong career path, but as a strategic wealth generation engine, a calculated, temporary heist on the corporate world designed to buy back your future. The statistical reality surrounding this industry paints a sobering picture. While the earning potential is undeniable, the rates of divorce, depression, and social isolation are significantly higher among remote workers than in the general population. This brings us to the core question. Is it truly possible for a person to trade 5 or 10 years of their life for a lifetime of autonomy, or is the system designed to ensure the worker always returns to the pits? We are exploring whether the high-vis vest is a ticket to liberty or a uniform for imprisonment. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The journey into the raw mathematics of wealth and the psychology of the swing is only just beginning. We must now look closer at the engine of wealth generation to understand how the successful few manage to break the cycle and find true independence. To understand how one transitions from the pits to a life of autonomy, we must first analyze the raw mathematics of the wealth generation engine that is unique to the resource sector. While the gross income is undeniably high, the secret power of the fly-in, fly-out model lies in the suppressed cost of living while on-site. For 2/3 of the year, or whatever the specific roster dictates, the company covers almost every essential: food, accommodation, and utilities. This creates a rare economic vacuum where a worker's daily overheads effectively vanish, leaving a massive surplus of liquid capital. If managed correctly, this isn't just a salary, it is a pressurized financial fire hose. However, this surplus often becomes the very catalyst for the golden handcuffs rather than the key to the exit. In the camp, mess halls, and site car parks, a toxic culture of conspicuous consumption frequently takes root. This is the trap of the big boy toys. It is the impulse to validate the grueling 12-hour shifts by purchasing a brand new, six-figure dual-cab ute, a jet ski that sees the water twice a year, or a massive suburban mansion that remains empty for weeks on end. These are not just assets, they are anchors that drag the worker back to the pits every Monday morning, forcing them to trade more of their limited time on Earth to service the interest on a lifestyle they barely have time to enjoy. The FIFO to Freedom blueprint requires a radical departure from this cultural norm. It is built on 3 mandatory freedom pillars designed to weaponize the high income rather than waste it. The first pillar is an aggressive savings rate, often aiming for 70% of net income. This is not about deprivation, but about ruthless prioritization. The second pillar is the total elimination of high-interest debt, clearing the path for the third pillar, strategic resource allocation into tax-effective investment vehicles. By treating the salary as a venture capital fund for their own life, the successful worker begins to compare investment paths. For some, the stability of high-yield real estate offers a tangible way to build equity and utilize leverage. For others, the liquidity and compounding power of equities and diversified index funds provide a faster, though more volatile, route to the finish line. The goal remains constant across both paths, creating a stream of passive income that gradually grows to equal and eventually surpass the cost of their desired lifestyle. Navigating this path requires a mastery of the psychology of the roster, the swing cycle. Perhaps 2 weeks of isolation followed by 1 week of frantic catch-up at home can lead to a mental fog where long-term goals are forgotten in favor of short-term dopamine hits. Burnout is the greatest threat to the blueprint. To survive, the worker must maintain a razor-sharp focus on the exit date philosophy. This is the practice of setting a non-negotiable hard deadline for leaving the industry forever. Without a date on the calendar, the high-stress environment of the mine site becomes normalized. The body adapts to the noise and the dust, and the mind begins to accept the shipping container, donga, as a permanent home. The exit date prevents this normalization, serving as a lighthouse that guides the worker through the darkest shifts and the most exhausting nights. Observation of the 5%. Those who successfully transition out of the resource sector into entrepreneurship or early retirement reveals a common set of habits. These individuals do not see themselves as miners or drillers. They see themselves as investors who happen to be working in a mine. They use their time on site to educate themselves, listening to financial podcasts in the truck or reading investment books in their room after their shift. They are the ones who decline the overtime for the sake of mental clarity and who keep their old cars while their peers sign away their futures for a new engine. They understand that every dollar saved is an hour of their future life bought back from the corporation. This disciplined approach is what separates the temporary tourist from the true architect of freedom. As the wealth builds and the passive income begins to trickle in, the worker approaches the most dangerous phase of the blueprint, the actual transition back to the world they left behind. The day eventually arrives when the FIFO worker checks out of the shipping container, donga, for the final time. The boots are caked in that familiar orange dust, but they won't be cleaned for another shift. However, as the charter plane lifts off from the remote airstrip, a new and unexpected challenge begins to take shape: the transition crisis. This re-entry problem is the final hurdle in the blueprint, and for many, it is the most difficult to clear. After years of high-stakes environments and salaries that dwarf the national average, the quiet rhythm of a suburban Tuesday can feel haunting. There is a psychological decompression sickness that occurs when the adrenaline of the pit is replaced by the stillness of home. The worker often finds that their identity has become so intertwined with the industry that they no longer know who they are without the high-vis vest. The execution of the Freedom Blueprint must move beyond accumulation and into the realm of sustainable withdrawal and purposeful living. It is not enough to have the money. One must have a map for the time that money has bought. This is the second act. The members of the 5% don't simply retire to a hammock. They transition into a lifestyle where work is driven by choice rather than necessity. Whether it is launching a small business, providing community mentorship, or returning to a trade on their own terms, the second act provides the structure that the mining camp once enforced through rosters. Without this purpose, the gravitational pull of the Golden Handcuffs remains strong, often tempting the worker back to the pits just to fill the void of a purposeless day. Central to this phase is the realization that health is the only form of wealth. The physical toll of years spent in the resource sector is a debt that eventually comes due. The noise of machinery, the inhalation of fine particulates, and the chronic sleep deprivation inherent in rotating shifts leave lasting marks. The blueprint is a hollow victory if the worker reaches the finish line with a broken body or a depleted mind. True freedom requires the vitality to enjoy it. Consequently, the transition involves a shift in self-care, moving away from the tough-it-out mentality of the site and toward a dedicated investment in physical and mental well-being. This is where the worker must reconcile with the family, acknowledging that while the money provided a house, it was their absence that made it feel empty. Rebuilding these relationships is the greatest investment of the journey. It requires a humble reintegration into domestic life, moving from being a visitor who provides funds to a partner who provides presence. Success in the context of this blueprint is redefined. It is no longer measured by the big boy toys or the volume of the annual bonus. Instead, the goalpost shifts toward the ownership of time. To own your time is to possess the only currency that cannot be earned back once it is spent. This connects the struggle of the FIFO worker to a universal human desire for autonomy. We are all, in ways, trading pieces of our lives for the means to live them. The mining industry makes this trade more visible and more extreme. The intellectual call to action for anyone observing this journey is to perform an audit of their own life. Are you using your career as a bridge to a future, or are you decorating the walls of your cell? The FIFO to Freedom blueprint is not just a financial strategy. It is an act of rebellion against the normalization of the permanent grind. It concludes not with a paycheck, but with the courage to walk away. It is the moment when the bank account says stay, but the soul says go. To walk through that gate for the time knowing that every hour of your future is your own is the resolution of the blueprint. It is the realization that the greatest resource ever mined wasn't the ore in the ground, but the freedom to live life on your